A group fighting to stop freighters anchoring off the Gulf Islands has received a boost. Former Federal Fisheries Minister John Fraser is calling on the federal government to conduct scientific studies on the effects of giant freighters anchoring off the coast of Gabriola Island. The former politician says the area is a productive fish habitat and could be damaged by the freighter traffic. Port officials have argued the anchorages are needed to handle the rise of cargo ships in the area. Chris Straw is a resident on Gabriola Island and a member of the Gabriolans Against Freighter Anchorages. It's also important for us to note, for full disclosure reasons, Chris retired from the CBC 2.5 years ago, but now joins us here to chat about this important issue. Hello, Chris.
Good afternoon.
What effect could these 5 proposed freighter anchorages have off Gabriola Island?
Well, there are a number of concerns. They range from safety, the effects on the environment, effects on the local economy, and quality of life issues. And I'll just go into them really briefly. In terms of safety, this area along the northeast coast of Gabriola is quite an exposed area. And we have heard from many experienced mariners that it's really not, that they actually shake their heads at the idea that it would be looked at as an anchorage site because of the dangers of ships being, blown aground and those sorts of dangers. Environmentally, there are many proven negative aspects to having larger ship anchors anchored, including probably the most significant one is the effect of the anchor chains themselves. As you can imagine, ships at anchor move with the tides and the change in winds, and they can basically have a swing circle where they drag huge, heavy chains across the ocean floor, and it isn't very long before they disrupt and then destroy the marine habitat on the seafloor, and all of the turbulence has an impact as well. There are all sorts of other concerns that people who live in other parts of the Gulf Islands and have these ships anchored know well, like they have to keep generators running, so there's a lot of noise, there's air pollution, they're often lit through the night with these massive lights that light up the ship. So the list goes on. And then I guess finally the effect on a community, not only the impacts that I just described, but the Gulf Islands are known as sort of a pristine environment, and I know certainly for Gabriola, that those attributes are really what drive our economy. So without people coming here to kayak and camp and fish and hike the trails and experience the beautiful environment, we really don't have much in the way of opportunity for job creation. So it's a bad idea on a bunch of fronts from our respect. I just want to say briefly too, it's not like we're opposed to shipping. We certainly understand that Canada is a trading nation and that shipping activity has to go on and that anchorages are needed. But our feeling is the demand for them is way beyond what is reasonable for a sensitive area like the Gulf Islands. Considering
all this, why was this site chosen by the Port of Metro Vancouver?
Well, it's hard to say. There was this came out of a process. There have been, I should back up, there have been anchorages throughout the Gulf Islands since the 70s. They were actually designated and created back in the early 70s. And this was, prior to the establishment of the Islands Trust. So they have existed, but this is the first time anyone has tried to put them in modern days. And if you think back to the 70s, you probably weren't around, or certainly
I was not.
But I remember having, people had asbestos in their houses. We were dealing with acid rain. The environmental awareness and understanding, both in terms of air pollution, but also effects on the oceans, were way less understood than they are now, and certainly way less a priority for governments. So this is the first time someone has looked at proposing new anchorages, and there was a group that was made up entirely of Transport Department, government, and industry people, so representatives of the shipping industry and the various, the ports and the pilotage authorities. And they somehow came up with this idea that this would be a safe place to anchor ships. We've been pushing to try to get more information about what studies were done. We know that they did what we consider to be a superficial environmental study that basically just looked at sort of cherry-picked existing data and has been widely criticized for not going far enough. But it's a mystery to us why they would have picked this area as well.
I'm looking at the letter now from former Federal Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, John Fraser. He served in that role in 1984 and 1985. How important is it having the former minister throw his voice behind your opposition to this?
Well, I think, we certainly are very pleased about this. And in addition to his role as a parliamentarian, as fisheries minister, he was also environment minister and speaker of the House for many years. But many people in British Columbia will recognize his name in the sense that after he left federal politics, he was appointed to a number of boards and governance bodies that were looking at the health of the salmon, particularly sockeye salmon, on the West Coast. So he's somebody with incredible credentials. As luck would have it for us, he also has a strong connection to Gabriola Island. There is a camp that's been here for decades, a youth camp for members of the Jewish community, and he's been a co-chair of that camp for many years. So he became aware of the issue and decided to speak out. And I think it's worth noting as well that he was one of 4 federal fisheries ministers who spoke out against the Harper government. You'll recall through the omnibus bill in 2012 that there were proposed cuts that really many people feel gutted the habitat protection conditions in the Fisheries Act. And unfortunately, those conditions went ahead, but he reminded the current fisheries minister in his letter that he took that position then, and he does now. And so one of the things that we're pushing for is that those conditions be restored in the Act to give it more teeth that would hopefully prevent something like this from going forward on the basis of the impact on the fisheries. And we understand that legislation is under review right now.
And is there any sense, though, when a final decision is going to be made about these anchorages off Gabriola?
Difficult to say. We haven't been told. We've seen documents that showed that they were actually planned to have all of this in place by the summer of 2016, if not earlier. So partly, I think, because of our intervention and other circumstances, it seems to have been put on hold. So we're not clear. But with all the talk about the big ocean protections plan that's going on right now, we know that anchorages is something that will be considered as part of that. So I think who knows when an announcement will be, but certainly the conversations about this idea are underway right now.
And you mentioned that you're not against the idea of shipping. During the process, it said that the Port of Metro Vancouver looked all along the coast for locations and deemed this the most suitable. Do you have, through the work that you've been doing, any alternatives that the Port of Metro Vancouver should consider that, in your mind, would be a better place for an anchorage?
Well, we've certainly, both from people involved directly in the shipping industry, we've heard lots of talk of other alternatives. So there are anchorages, as off of Esquimalt and down Constance Bank area that apparently have more capacity. We've also been told on more than one occasion that there is actually more room inside the Port of Vancouver. But I think the biggest issue for us, probably, and the one that needs to be looked at the most seriously, is really the supply chain and the efficiency within the port. So, there are only a couple of reasons why ships anchor. It's because they've come early, or in some cases they have to go back and forth into port, so they may get a part of a load and then go back to anchorage and wait for the trains to come in for an additional load. These are things that are managed and can be managed in such a way that they could reduce the amount of time that ships have to go to anchor. And we think that, it's great to talk about having plans to clean up spills when they happen and all that sort of stuff, but there's more that could be done to just right now prevent reduce the demand for the number of anchorages, especially when you look at something like a protected area like the Gulf Islands.
Chris, thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That was Chris Straw. He's a member of Gabriolans Against Freighter Anchorages.